Hello, hello. We're here again. Please take a seat. All right. This is the session on thermal energy storage. If you like this one, you can also watch the recorded version of Sven's introduction at the beginning and the model predictive control session that we had here before, which was on controlling some of those systems. I'm just here to introduce our awesome panel. Our moderator, Sven Moomen from DOE, is here to manage the panel and moderate it. And we have 3 industry leaders who have presence in California, have existing systems, TES, that are covering different places in the market. We have Yoram Ashray from Nostromo. They're doing storage for large buildings. We have Robert Morton from Stasis, and they're doing small commercial buildings. And we have Pierre Delforge from Harvest Hallmark, and they're doing residential. So I'm just going to leave the podium to Sven. Thanks for being here.
So I love the enthusiasm, like, thermal energy storage is so critical. So I'm really looking forward to this panel. Next slide, or first slide. So I guess next slide. For those who weren't part of the my keynote, so I'm a supervisory technology manager at the Buildings Technology Office at DOE, and I manage the thermal energy storage portfolio as well as building envelope R&D. Peak demand is significantly is projected to rise significantly, driven by electrification. And here are just some statistics. If we reach our electrification goals, peak demand is going to, the energy usage is going to, or energy consumption is going to increase quite a bit, but peak demand is going to increase even more, like 2 to 6%, like X times, in colder climates. So on average, 2.5 times or so. The electric peak, is in New York, they're forecasting that the winter peak is going to be twice the current, electric peak in the summer, while the summer peak is going to, remain pretty constant. And with extreme weather events, and global warming and whatnot, those forecasts are going to have like a big, margin of error going forward. Next slide. So because of all of these, next slide. So I had this slide earlier. The peak demand is going to rise significantly from today's levels, to 2050 and beyond. Driven by electrification of space, space heating, water heating, appliances. Yes, there are other loads, as I mentioned during my keynote, such as electric vehicles and whatnot. But a lot of that is going to happen at, is due to buildings. The next slide. Actually, just continue one more. This is the same slide I had during my keynote. Thermal energy storage or energy storage is going to be critical to managing those increases in peak demand. And we're here on the thermal energy storage panel, in part because it's a huge opportunity. Like if you look at the future grid, most of that mismatch between generation demand can be it could be done through thermal energy storage. And yes, we'll need battery storage. So ideally, you need a hybrid system for maximum benefits of both technologies at the lowest levelized cost of storage. Next slide. There are lots of benefits. Pointed out during my keynote. There are multiple benefits that thermal energy storage has, compared to batteries. And one is, it can actually improve efficiencies. Batteries can never, batteries always consume more energy. So, heat pump efficiencies could be improved with thermal energy storage. Next slide. So there are some additional analysis that shows that, even with aggressive, economies of scales and, cost reduction for batteries, thermal energy storage, it's already cost competitive right now, or cost, lower cost solution for energy storage, and projected in the future. So there's going to be quite a bit of delta, even with aggressive battery, cost reductions. And we need to focus on affordability. We need to focus on simplicity of integration, of installation, control, and so we need to continue to focus on balance of plant reductions, and that's a lot of what I'm focusing on in my R&D portfolio. Next slide. So we've mapped out some opportunities for thermal energy storage. Space conditioning, heating, and cooling for residential buildings, commercial rooftop units, as well as residential water heaters, is a significant opportunity as we continue to electrify those end uses. However, there are also some early prime market opportunities in terms of refrigeration, reach-in freezers, or reach-in coolers, walk-in coolers and whatnot, while chillers and commercial chillers and also district systems is going to continue to be a great opportunity for thermal storage. Next slide. So I think this is almost my last slide. So there are some great opportunities. First, with great support from Nostromo, from other OEMs. Finally, we have a tax credit for thermal storage. So not just battery, but thermal storage, which is fantastic. And then secondly, that was part of my keynote. We launched a store for build, or storage for buildings consortium focused on thermal storage back in 2022 December. So not even 2 years from now, and we're looking at accelerating storage solutions, testing those out. And we have 2 steering councils that with industry involvement to help with driving R&D and helping also pave the way in terms of market adoption. Next slide. That's it for me. So you got my email address. I would love to have all of you involved with the consortium. So email me. We'll connect you. So now we're gonna go with Pierre.
Good afternoon. It's exciting to see so many people at 4 p.m. all excited about thermal energy storage. So Harvest Thermal, we're a Bay Area startup founded in 2019 on the idea of using thermal energy storage as a way to make heat pumps more affordable and therefore more scalable in the market. One of the challenges with heat pumps is they don't always save money on energy bills, and particularly not in PG&E territory. And if we want to scale them in the market, just like solar, rooftop solar grew because it was saving people money on their bills and they had good incentives too, we need to do the same thing with heat pumps. So, and this is one way of doing it. Next slide, please. So I'm starting with this because it's not always obvious, but heat is more than 6 times cooling energy on average in the US in residential. It's different in commercial, but in residential, more than 6 times energy is spent on heating and hot water than on cooling. So that, that's the reason why we started with heat storage, because you have a better ROI and because you have more value for the grid and more value for the customer. We will tackle, and we're planning to tackle cold water storage, chill water storage as well. But for us, it comes second. The other reason is from a utility perspective, from a grid perspective, we have nearly half of the states in the country have utility balancing areas which are winter peaking today or very close to becoming winter peaking. And we'll have them very soon. We'll have the majority of states in the country will have winter peaking grids because of building vehicle electrification. So from a utility perspective, addressing the winter peak, although today we think a lot about the summer peak, particularly in California, is going to become more and more important. So that's where we're going, and addressing winter peaking loads is going to be a key priority going forward. Next, please. So how do we do it? The key idea is make it cheap, make it affordable so that it's scalable, so it's viable in the market. We didn't want our technology to be just an R&D project, although that's important, but we want it to be a deployment project, something that we can sell and grow in the market. So 2 key ideas behind that. One is to use sensible storage, which is just hot water-based storage instead of PCM. That's, hot water tanks have been around for a long time. They have a mature supply chain. They're cheap. They're high tech, and we can basically leverage something that exists off the shelf and with a few adaptations, but basically use an existing technology. The second is to use one single very high performance heat pump, CO2 heat pump in this case, to do both heating and cooling and address both of these end users and make that heat pump make both heating and hot water flexible with that architecture. So the Harvest Pod, which is the smart controller, is both a hydronic controller, basically a hydronic system in a box, and a electronic controller, is what turns that humble water tank into a smart thermal battery and decides, monitors when people use heat and hot water, correlates that with the weather, with day of the week, forecasts how much heat and hot water people are going to need, and then based on the price signal and the weather forecast, optimizes when the heat pump runs, right? So it's all designed using modern technology, computing technology that you can now have very cheaply at the device level to be able to optimize and make, turn components by themselves and not very smart into a smart thermal battery that optimizes for costs and for emissions and grid costs. And that hot water in the tank is basically used for heating and hot water whenever people need it with no compromise on comfort. And the thermal battery does the work in the background. So as I mentioned this morning, if you were at our session, the storage tank, we have multiple sizes, but this size, which is 120 gallon, which is the most common size, it has a capacity of 7 kWh. So it's about 50,000 BTUs, which translates to 7 kWh at the COP03. And in the winter, we discharge it twice a day, which is about 14 kWh of dispatch energy, which is more than you typically get from a Tesla Powerwall, right? At a much lower cost. Next, please. So what are the benefits of thermal energy storage? The first one, I mentioned that a little bit about grid, but just for a minute, put yourself in the shoes of a grid operator for a day. From midnight to midnight, this is California grid, which has a lot of solar in the middle of the day. So you have that trough, that belly of the duck curve. And then, but at night, in the morning and the evening in particular, you have high costs and emissions on the grid. And if you look at when conventional heat pumps operate, They tend to operate when it's coldest in the morning, in the winter before sunrise, and in the evening after sunset when it gets cold again. And that's in large part coincident with cost and emissions in the grid. With a thermal battery with thermal energy storage, you can reshape that load and run the heat pump in the middle of the day on clean and cheap energy. And also when it's warmest and the heat pump is more efficient, has a higher COP, as Sven mentioned, we can optimize for COP by using thermal energy storage to shift load from the coldest to the warmest times of day. So you have efficiency benefits, grid benefits, efficiency benefits. You can reduce operating costs both from efficiency gains as well as from time of use arbitrage or dynamic price arbitrage. Right? So between efficiency and time of use, we can save roughly about 30% on energy costs compared to gas in PG&E territory or compared to other conventional heat pumps. You have other benefits like comfort. So you can use hydronic heat during the heat pump defrost cycle. So there's no customer impact and you don't need to use electric resistance to fill in the defrost gaps. And we perform better at a lower cost than lithium ion. So you could do the same thing as what we do with lithium ion. It costs a lot more. It's not as efficient. The thermal Tesla Powerwall, when new, has a 92% round trip efficiency. We have 95%, and we don't. It's constant over the life of the system. It doesn't degrade. Whereas both capacity and efficiency for lithium ion degrade over time. So better performance, efficiency, and cost. Next, please. So I'm just going to end on some field results, the load shifting in action. So on the left, on the time of use, this is one home over an entire quarter. And you can see there was more than 90% load shifting off peak on a 9-hour peak period, right? So the PG&E time of use rate. And on the right is hourly dynamic price response as part of the CalFlexHub cycle 2, where you can see the prices varying, to peak signal, morning and evening. Color of the bars represent price on the second chart. And then the orange curve is thermal demand, both heating and hot water. And the blue curve is when that demand was reshaped using thermal energy storage. And we could shift on time of use about 90% of the load, both space and water heating. And on dynamic price, because it's got 2 peaks, it's about 70% of the load on a daily basis. That's it. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Rob Morton. I'm the president and founder of Stasis Energy Group. First of all, I'd like to thank LBNL and CalFlexHub for hosting this. I'm actually quite honored to be here. Amazed that we actually are finally at the point where we can present our technology. Stasis Energy Group is we are what we believe is the world's first induct thermal storage, or shall I say, successful delivery of thermal storage in a supply duct of HVAC systems. We essentially capture the cold. Our target market is here in California. We seek to target package rooftop units, both new and existing. When we look at California from the standpoint of how we're going to reach our 20, 30, 40, and 50 goals, it always seemed to me that we weren't really considering the 900-pound gorilla in the room, which in my mind was all the existing inventory of buildings. There's 1.5 million package rooftop units out there. The average age is about 12 years old. They're not very efficient. They don't really work the way we want them to do. And it seems as if the approach has been, well, wait till they fail and we'll do a remove and replace. But that puts you so far down the road that you've lost the opportunity. So rule number 1 for us was, let's see if we can make a difference in the existing market. Next slide, please. So very simply, without further ado, this is an example of a unit. This one is actually just outside my office door. It cools my office and the front suite of the building. This is placed on a table at floor level, of course. But you can see the typical supply ducting on the left and right-hand side, which we cut into and install a thermal energy storage system. Inside the chassis are aluminum plates with a very high rate of thermal energy transfer, which contain or encapsulate a bio-based phase change material. That bio-based phase change material is sustainably sourced, as you know, with bio-based products, predominantly date palm and coconut oil. it freezes or solidifies in the low 60s. So we have 50 to 55-degree air coming off the coil during normal daily delivery of a cooling call. In the process, without any special controls, without any intervention, or without any manipulation of the system, we are essentially storing energy during the day. Key point in that, as you all know, here in California, at the end of the day, the buildings are warm in summer. You turn your system off. You go home, that heat tends to propagate, emanate, stay inside the building. It doesn't get released. It's there the next morning. So surprisingly enough, one of the biggest demand calls that we have or energy uses is first thing in the morning when you come in and you turn your air conditioner on, because you have to evacuate and take all that heat out of the building. In the process of doing that, we are preparing our product. We're essentially charging our media. The benefit of that, surprisingly enough, is that we are essentially creating air conditioning payload that will be deployed later in the day, but we're doing it at a much, much better COP because it's a much lower temperature. I love what you said, Pierre, about energy efficiency. I'm sure you've run into it when you talk about thermal storage and people say, well, there's no energy savings. And you say, yes, there is. There's a new way that we have to look at this. So I applaud you on what you said, because we are trying to carry that same message forward. So essentially, we charge during normally from 8 to about 11, 8 to noon, depending on the climate, depending on the outdoor ambient temperature, the daily load, what have you. The charge penalty, if you will, runs approximately 2% of the baseline load. So you're running from, let's say you run your building from 8 in the morning till 9 p.m. at night. So from 8 to 4, the total charge penalty is about additional 2% of energy use. However, at 4 o'clock, our automated controls and logic steps in. We get in front of the onboard mechanical and controls, and we deploy what we call a PWM cycle, or pulse width modulation logic cycle, where we limit compressor run times. Okay. The reason we limit compressor run times is because we have a bank of thermal energy material stored, ready to release air as the air is continued through the system with the operational fan, replacing air conditioning with phase change, CTC cooling. So if I could go to the next slide, please. Very simply, this information that I'm providing to you is not us saying this is actually from a 3-year just completed study for the California Energy Commission with 44 units across the state, a year of baseline, excuse me, a year of performance measurement, and then about 9 months of pretty intense and back and forth collaborative analysis of the data, all independently third-party monitored and established. This is one of the leading charts that's going to be in the report that will be published here in just a matter of weeks. Results speak for themselves. Excuse me. We target package units. That's a market that we think needs to be dealt with. We're able to reduce 60% peak demand. Very simply, how do you do that? In a 15-minute period where you create demand, we can limit our compressor run times to no more than 6 minutes. That's on the worst day, we're giving you 60%. We are shifting between 50 and 55% kWh from peak to off-peak. Because we're now cooling, we're shifting and charging the material, the media at a lower temperature, we're able to bring up from 10 to 15% energy efficiency. You can go into any HVAC manufacturer reference standard materials and you look at their COP values, and you'll see on a really hot day, you can save 23% in energy consumption. These are reference standards that are accepted by ASHRAE and AHRI and are reflected in the EER and the CER standards. So this is nothing that we're promoting that isn't already there. Our greenhouse gas numbers, quite frankly, are very significant, and we're very happy with them. We're charging with sustainables. We're deploying in lieu of carbon-based fuel sources. Frankly, we have yet to do a life cycle analysis. We've been recommended by the CEC that that is something that we need to do. We are sustainably sourcing our raw materials, which are bio-based. We're sustainably and logistically doing the right thing. It's a product that's fully recyclable. So if you look at a total life cycle greenhouse gas footprint, I'm very excited about the numbers that are going to yield. With respect to dynamic pricing, our product is controlled with proprietary building automation system, which is installed. The logic is created by us. If we were to receive a dynamic price signal, and we are working with CalFlexHub to develop some of these practices, the same way we are getting in front of the 4 to 9 peak period, we could do that on a real-time price basis with hourly or dynamic price system. We are so excited about the dynamic price opportunity. Last but not least, we talk about hard to read, excuse me, retrofit markets. When we sat down to say, let's get after this thing and see if we can come up with a solution, it was by design. It's the core of our DNA. Our primary market is and remains disadvantaged low-income communities in California. We've been very successful in that regard. It's not that we don't want to push the product in other areas, but there's an opportunity, I think, for the greater good as we move our technology forward. So very simply, that's our technology. And thank you very much.
I'll use this. Yeah, thank you. So last presentation for the day. So appreciate your stamina and fortitude to stay up and listen. My name is Yoram Escher. I'm CEO of Nostromo. Thermal energy storage for buildings, but we're going like, we started with residential, then we moved to like the mid-size commercial. We're talking about the big ones. So like 100,000 square feet and above that use chilled water systems for cooling. These are big behemoth, as we're going to see now. Next slide, please. So I'll just use a video to explain how the technology works, and I'm already see that it's working, so that's a good start. So like we're talking about the big buildings, and our technology is called the ice brick, can be placed anywhere in the building, could be on the rooftop, in the basement, along the wall. We can hide it so it doesn't come in the way or use any space. Why does these systems consume so much energy? Is because they're cooling water, chilling water from like 54 to 45 Fahrenheit, and that circulates throughout the entire building. We talk about hundreds of tons of water per hour that circulate throughout a building, and then they're back warmed and they have to be rechilled. So to charge, we use the most clean and abundant substance on the planet, which is water. We freeze it to create ice, and we do this in a very highly efficient way. There's some patents about the process and materials that we create the ice more efficiently than normal. And that's in a charge mode. Now for discharging, we take the returning water of the building, we route it through the system, and we cool it using the ice as it melts. So we actually provide the cold energy by just melting the ice. We don't need electricity for that. This is what a real system looks like on a rooftop. We have some systems in basements. It's like Lego blocks, so you can really configure it to fit whatever space you have available in the building, like big Kit Kat boxes. No degradation, so I like lithium batteries. Your storage media is perpetual, can freeze and unfreeze forever. Highly efficient, north of 90% round-trip efficiency. Controlled discharge, we can just pump the energy out at any rate, so we can meet different use cases, whether it's a peak shaving or it's demand response, whatever the case is. And it's clean, sustainable. It's really, solving a sustainability problem with a sustainable solution. So that's what the technology is. And next slide, please. Yeah. And so going straight to the impact. So this is from a study that folks here should know. It's the phase 3 demand response, California. And this segment here is commercial HVAC. It's the biggest opportunity for shifting load on the grid in terms of end users. So even if you're putting batteries in the building, you'll probably be using it to run your compressors. This is kind of a demand and response price curve, what procurement cost, how much capacity you can get. I think we're at the bottom range already, and we can probably get more capacity than it is. So I think there's some updates that can be made to this work. So really the biggest opportunity, even before we get the winter peaks, is already on the summer peaks. And the technology is available. It's just a question of policy and the business models, and all this capacity, can we start to move that or use it in a flexible way, whatever, or responding to price signals. Next slide, please. Yeah, so it's been mentioned a lot in the last panel about comfort. So the good thing is there's no comfort price when you're storing thermal energy and you're providing it to the building. They just don't know. When we operate the system, the building doesn't even know that it's working. They're still getting the same cold energy that they need, just not from the grid, but from the ice bricks in our case, or from other technologies that you heard earlier. Everything is network, everything is connected, everything is automated. So if you talk about reliability or predictability, will the utility get what they're paying for? Yes, because it's automated, it's controlled, it's designed for a virtual power plant operation, and you can really create a very significant capacity in small, dense areas where, like for example, in downtown LA, you can get megawatts of capacity without anybody seeing where it's coming from. So I think that's the opportunity, and that also creates some reasons to think about how do you create the business models and the payment constructs to make that work and incentivize customers, because it is infrastructure you need to invest. It's unlike, you're not just looking at a thermostat or an EV charger that you already have, and just you need to motivate the owner to operate it based on the grid. Here you need to invest and put this in place. So how do you secure the ROI for the customer to invest in this and install this in the building? That's the key question for a policy and for a market development. And programs that are not predictable in the revenues are a challenge. Why would you invest in technology if you don't know exactly how much you got to get? So these are kind of the questions that have to be answered, and probably discuss it more in the panel. So thank you very much. I think that's the last slide.
So I'll start with some questions, and then we'll open it up to audience questions or online questions. So the first one is for Robert, but if others want to chime in, please feel free to do so. So what do you see as the most pressing challenge to widespread market adoption and deployment? And how do you recommend we overcome that challenge?
Okay, thank you very much. That's actually a kind of a tricky question. It can be very hard to answer without pointing fingers and naming names, which is something that really isn't going to work out with us in the infancy, the development of our market technology. But the reality is, what I can tell you is this. We're talking about whether it's you or myself developing a product. In a lot of respects, you probably feel like I've felt for the last few years. We're developing a product that doesn't exist for a market that doesn't exist. And when I say it, the market doesn't exist, not that there's not a need, but there's not the financial metrics and funding to actually make it happen. We talk about heating peaks that are coming. I've already patented our technology. I can get the same result for heating, actually better for heating than I can for cooling, but there's no reason for me to introduce to the market. We could go into residential. We could team together to do joint systems to really move the needle, but there's no money in it. How do you take a need, which is unfunded, and develop the market metrics to do that? I'm going to say it another way. We take a typical 5-ton, the most ubiquitous, common 5-ton HVAC unit in the state. It's the #1 most used. We can take 3.6 or 60% or more peak demand out, 3.6 kW. If you go to a CPUC meeting or meeting with utility companies, they will say it costs $2,200 to produce a kW of energy. Okay, great. That's $7,000. Heck, we can do this with a 1-year ROI in our product. Let's get it to market. And we get $400. Okay. The need is there. The customer demand and understanding is there. Every customer, and we expect to have 200 sales in the next 30 days. We've got I don't know, over 100 sales this year. We're moving the needle. Everybody we talk to wants to participate, but then they look at the economics of it and the lack of funding that's there. It becomes very challenging. So several years ago, I decided I was going to approach that, and I want to do it from the standpoint I'm going to skip the utility companies at the tariff level because they take 3 or 4 years to get a new tariff to come in. I'm going to go a little bit higher and look at the CEC and CPUC level. I can say that it's been effective. You, like me, we both just won CEC grants that are giving us several $1 million to start up a manufacturing site. Thank you very much, CEC. But that hasn't been reflected at the tariff or the consumer level. We get to build a product. We still don't have a financial model for it because it's not been monetized yet. So we're getting some support, but the problem is policy is very difficult to change. We've been working very closely with the SCHIP program. I don't know if you two guys have done that. We're very, very, very close to completing that and being the first thermal storage company ever to get approved under SCHIP. Okay. Second? That's still pretty good, isn't it? Okay, congratulations. Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations to you. Awesome. Third, all right. So,
But
thank you.
For chillers,
For chillers.
For rooftops,
Okay.
you have it.
all right. So we'll just parse the market like we should do and all work together to move the boat. Same thing occurs working with CalTF to get a statewide incentive. We worked for 7 months where they said you could reduce demand off the record. You could reduce demand by 100%, but if you don't show EE, we're not going to approve you. And it just makes no sense. So what does that mean? The problem is policy and tariffs have to change. The solution is leadership. And I think it's leadership from the national labs, leadership from the CEC, and leadership from people in the audience. Nothing's going to happen unless we make it happen. If we wait for it to happen, we'll be sitting here in 5 years still talking about it.
All right, hard act to follow. So I think this resonates. What I would say is that the adoption rate of a new technology. These are new technologies, right? It is not deployed. It's an S curve, right? It starts very low, and the faster you can accelerate that inflection point, and the faster you're going to generate adoption because of technology cost reductions, because of awareness in the market. So it's really important at the beginning of the S curve to invest and to lean in on incentives, on support, whether it's tariffs or incentives, and it's going to at the moment, if it's an extra cost, there's going to be very little adoption. So we have to be able to be cost competitive with existing technologies, and that has to come from incentives. Over time, just like with solar, incentives are going to step down, and then the market will be self-sustainable. But if we want to accelerate adoption, we have to be able to incentivize and to do it in a way that to try to do it quickly and at a level that's really going to jumpstart the market. We have technologies, they're here. So now it's just a matter of how do we get them to market.
So maybe just for your to piggyback on what Rob and Pierre just mentioned, to get more adoption, to get more test flex capacity on the market, we talked, we heard policies and market mechanisms. What do you think would be most helpful in that regard? Like what? Yeah, and how to get to that level? So
Yeah.
Anyone in the audience, listen.
I can start and then
We need your help.
let somebody take it. Okay. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, that's helpful. Let's start with what not working, and then how can that be fixed? So if you look at the economics of storage in a commercial building, so one way to monetize is through the utility rates. Okay, you're shifting from peak to off peak, and that arbitrage, or you do peak shaving, there's a certain amount that you can monetize. When you look at current costs, that alone doesn't pencil. Okay, and you need to find other revenue streams to support that. And obviously, the next opportunity is DR. And the problem with DR for storage in a building is two things. One is the baseline issue. So you don't if you want to do daily shifting, then you don't get a baseline anymore. And that's the second thing is you're being called on events. And so, but who wants to invest in technology that you only get called 10, 15 times a year, right? And when you think about it, is that fair? I mean, you don't call a picker plant 10 or 15 times a year, right? So you're paying those resources every day, but for load reduction, you're just paying on events. So there's a bit of a, maybe rethinking. Why don't we make load modifying a base load and use them every day for, shifting loads every day from your peak to off peak, and start to kind of levelize the line, the duck curve, started filling up the belly every day, and just use the peaker plants for events, for the extreme events, because they're polluting and this is clean. So I think that's the way to look at it. And then, so forget about baseline, just pay for a daily shift. And I think you're going to the economics are going to start to look a lot better, and you're going to get more resources. And those resources can be online, can be automated, could be connected, and ultimately can give the keys to the utility or the aggregator to just dispatch it whenever they need. That can be at peak time, could be when there's other, congestion or load issue. And that can be just part of the whole grid. This is a true integration of buildings with the grid, the vision of the grid integrated buildings. I think dynamic pricing is a great step in that direction. The issue becomes the predictability of your revenue. So if you go to a customer and say, well, you got to look at those price curves and start calculating how much you're going to make, that's going to be a little challenging for them to do the math and decide, yeah, I'm going to invest the money in this kind of. There has to be a predictability of the revenue stream, so commercial buildings can make that commitment, invest, and it has to be long term. It can't be like this year is going to be this way, and then next we're going to have another program. This is for 3 years. This is for 2 years. These technologies are for 20 years, 25 years. So you got to think about things that are going to last, and not just going to be short term. So I think that's the way to think about it. I think if on this, we're talking about creating a market. I think technology works. They're efficient. They have great data. It's just to develop the market structure that can, enable the deployment.
Great. So one additional question before we open it up to online questions or audience participation. So starting off with Pierre, as we continue down the path of electrification, do you see that the suite of technologies shifting, end uses or applications shifting in terms of thermal storage, and do you see an R&D need?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball for where technology is going, but I do think that R&D is going to continue to be really important, and particularly to get the cost curve down and to accelerate that downward shift. What's the less money we want to spend on incentives to get to that self-sustaining stage, the more we need to invest in cost reductions. And so I think, some of the public investments are really critical to get that going, and private investments will come as soon as the investors see the market picking up and see the opportunity of that next big thing in building energy. And we just need to be able to demonstrate that potential, and really to really attract investment. But I think public investment and grants are really important to try and accelerate cost reduction, which is what's blocking or what's hindering market adoption today. If it's an additional cost and you don't get enough revenue, one way is to increase the revenue, which is important too, but you need to get to cost parity after incentives and with cost reductions. And I think maybe just one more word on this: there's many cost reduction opportunities. At least for our technology, there's heat pumps that are better designed for efficiency and for thermal energy storage applications, not just for direct heating applications. There's controls integration, there's hardware integration, form factors that are suited to different markets. So there's many different things that can be done, and a lot of we're just at the beginning of that cost curve, and there's many opportunities to bring it down and with support.
Rob or Yoram?
Yeah, I'd like to address that really quick. With respect to ongoing R&D efforts, and in particular DOE funding, I think it's absolutely critical. It's wonderful. I guarantee we all have availed ourselves and benefited from that. But at the end of the day, that's kind of a push from behind, and what we need is a pull into the marketplace. Okay, it doesn't matter how much money you throw in on this end if there isn't a demand on the other side. I look at things very simply. I say, if I was sitting on that side of the table, would I be interested? If it product doesn't have a 5-year ROI, I wouldn't buy it from me. No matter how much it's future leaning and we're helping this, I'm just like, seriously? 5 years, I can do something else with the money and actually contribute. I'll donate money that's going to do more than the benefit here. It just doesn't work. So what we need to do is we need to drive down the cost so that our product can make a difference. As we scale the product, our COGS and our product costs start to drop dramatically. I talk to a lot of investors around the country, and they say, well, you can't do an incentivized product. And I say, by God, this is California. Show me a product that's successful that wasn't incentivized in the last 20 years. So why don't we accept that and embrace it? The market is there. Time is running short. The need is high. The three of us have technologies that are coming from the same vein in slightly different markets. I think the three of us would agree we're 100% behind. This is a solution. Personally, I will not rest until my product has less than a 3-year ROI, because to me, then it becomes a no-brainer. It's more smart to buy that product and install it than it is, but I'm going to need help and continued support to do it.
I agree that scale is going to drive costs down, and the question, how do you scale up? It's one is about, of course, economics, and the more adoption, your costs are going to go down, and that will drive additional. So I think we just need to kind of kickstart the process, and I think that will, go in that direction. So I'm pretty optimistic. If sounded different. In terms of technology, I think heat storage is definitely a need, and what Sven, you guys are doing at the building technology office and PCMs and all that stuff. I think that's a clear need, and with the heat electrification, winter peaks, same thing we see with the summer peak. It's going to end up happening in the wintertime. The third thing I think that's going to accelerate beyond just the economics is regulation, and I've said this several times. You cannot build a building today without storage for cars, right? They don't let you park the car on the street. And the same thing that you shouldn't expect the grid to hold the energy for you and just feed it to you whenever you want. You got to take some responsibility for this. And the regulator is telling you, you want to build a 40-floor building, you're going to start with 10 levels down to put the cars in the building. So I think every building in the future should have storage. We just have to show that it's working, it's economic, it has an ROI that's like the same as what other investments they're doing in the building. And I think the vision is every building has energy storage. I mean, 75% of electricity is consumed in a building. Why not? That's to me, it's pretty obvious. So.
Great. Do we have any online questions?
3 questions.
We do not.
Okay. Any audience questions?
Did I see someone? Oh. I'll go you.
And Sven's probably like, why is he here in this room? So 20 years ago, when I was working on thermal storage, I'd go and meet people, and everybody, I was a young engineer. I didn't know what I didn't know. I'd go meet people, and they'd be like, hey, we have done this for 20 years. It doesn't work. We have had all these problems. How are we going to do something differently? Right? I don't want to be that kind of a curmudgeon, even though sometimes I might sound like that. But I really want to understand how. So I was part of developing that first PLS program that gives $400 per kW. I worked on incorporating thermal storage into Title 24 through the ACM. So done a lot of work in this space, right? And I always go back to, okay, we have successful models like what CalMac has. We have chill water storage that's pretty common in airports and other places. when we did PLS, I wanted to make sure that we achieved energy efficiency. So we made sure we put in that energy efficiency requirement in PLS. So PLS is permanent load shift. So that's a program that's been run by the utilities for many years. And I think it's now part of the SCHIP. So given all that, right, where I'm going with this is I'm trying to understand how we are going to overcome those barriers that have been around for a long time, but also the way people have addressed that. CalMac's business is around reducing the number of chillers, reducing the sizing of the chillers, so that you can, it's not about demand response or demand flexibility. It's about load leveling at the building level. That seems to be where the cost effectiveness made sense. And so when I think about just how are your technologies looking at load leveling at the building level so that we can reduce the first cost, but also for me, one of the most successful thermal storage programs is pre-cooling with thermostats, because essentially you're using the thermal storage in the envelope and you're able to do that. I think when we did some analysis, when we ran some utility pilots, it was like 3 kW equivalent in a place like Nebraska, and you could get for a $100 thermostat, right? So I'm trying to understand, like, what are we going to do? So this is the state of the market. How are we going to overcome the barriers that have been in the market for many, many years?
I'd like to address the last question you had, the last comment that you make. You talk about pre-cooling in a building, which is, for all intents and purposes, that's a controls plate, right? You're not doing anything different. It's a automated controls plate. Controls are integral to my technology, but it's not, as one of the gentlemen who was sitting here earlier in the day, he said, it's either software or it's hardware. And in our case, it's both. We're bringing both tables. It's not one or the other. One of the problems that we've had is demonstrating beyond any reasonable doubt to people who have, frankly, a lot of experience, who said, well, all you're doing is you're doing a controls plate. So we've had to go on to exhaustive CalNext, EE, 2 CalNext, 2 utility projects to show in different venues and different climate zones and different building types, okay, we're going to remove our PCM, we're going to do a controls plane, this is what you get. And we're going to put our thermal storage in with the logic, and this is what you get. And it's like, wow, there is a difference. But there's that institutional resistance to overcome. I understand that it's incumbent upon companies like us to prove our technology beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yet we can't just trust us. I mean, that's not what any of us are saying. Personally, I've invested the last 7 years and a lot of money into a first principle physics, full-on simulation program. Our squared values are in the low 90s right now. I'm trying to convert it with potentially the help with LBNL from the language and model that we're using into Energy Plus, because if I can't give it to you to use it, we're left to, you just got to trust me. So we're trying to do these things. We're trying to demonstrate, but sometimes we walk out of a meeting and say, boy, it just would have been nice if we had met with an open mind. I hate to say that, but that's what it feels like. You're pushing a 2-ton heavy thing uphill sometimes. The PLS program, you said you were involved in it. That was a wonderful program. I wish we had more of that. That would be beautiful for us if we had a permanent load shifting program. Instead, we're having to work with the tariff and hoping the tariff incentivizes it, which quite frankly doesn't. We just did a 44 unit installation, as I mentioned, for 3 years in all 3 IOUs. The results are agnostic of building type. Why? Because it's a materials and a controller play. We're working downstream from the air conditioning unit, modifying the airflow and managing from that standpoint. The savings were eerily similar, regardless of the climate zone, building type, RTU size, age of the RTU, all that kind of stuff. And then we carried it over to financial. In one of the utilities, a 5-ton unit, saving about $1,600 a year. In the next utility company, we're saving about $1,400 a year. In the next utility company, it costs the customer $150 a year to have that unit, which is insane. And what do I do with that? I stand at the window and complain. It doesn't get me very far. Hence the leadership aspect I was talking about. That's my 2 cents.
Yoram, do you want to respond?
I'll just add, I don't like speaking after you because I sound so dull and you look so exciting. But to Ram's point, a couple of things. So if you think about new construction and you design a building with storage, you can absolutely take down some of the other equipment. You can definitely use storage instead of another chiller, and offset those costs. If you're thinking retrofits, it's a bit of a different situation because they already have their setup, and you're not gonna take down the chiller. You're basically adding additional equipment to what they already have. Yes, they may need less capacity as a result because during peak time they're not going to be using their chillers. I agree with your point about pre-cooling is more of a control. It's also shifting and so on. But if we're talking about the 4 to 9, yeah, you can cool the building more until 4 o'clock. So after 4 o'clock, you use a little less. I'm not sure how that will reflect on efficiency then, if you're, maxing out your cooling before the 4 o'clock p.m. So everything has a price at the end.
I would just add that about 20 years ago, the requirement of renewable portfolio standards, so the requirement for renewable energy in the state, was somewhere around 5%. I don't remember the exact number, but something like that. And 20% would be the absolute maximum we'd ever be able to get on the grid, right? And then as we reached 5%, we set the standard to 33%, and then to 50, and now it's 100. And I think the same thing needs to happen with this new technology. At the moment, it's not in the market, so it doesn't work, or it doesn't exist. And as we are able to demonstrate it works, do pilots, measurement, verification, I think we have, at least for our technology, we have that on California already. We don't have it in other states in the country. So we're all, all interested in having other utilities, other states do MND pilots. But in California, we are at the deployment stage. We have technology that works, it's demonstrated, that's available. And the best thing we can do is to, show people that it exists and that they should get it. And that will reset re-anchor where we think we can go with this technology. I love thermostat, load flexibility, pre-cooling, preheating, and there's a lot of potential we can get very quickly with that, but it's only going to shift, 5-10% of the load. So even if you have 100% adoption of that, you're only shifting 5-10% of your HVAC load, and we can shift 90% of it. So how do we get ready for that?
So we started late, so how about one more question? I think I saw a hand up.
Sure. This is a question specifically about the ice storage system. It sounded like you were targeting significantly the existing building market. To what extent do you think you're going to be limited by the capacity of existing chillers to reach ice-making temperatures?
So first, we can put a dedicated chiller. And long term, that's probably more efficient because you size it and you spec it exactly for your charging needs, and versus existing chiller, which is they can make ice, but we're not like spec'd for that job. And the second thing is that we're more flexible on charging. Okay, we can charge like at night. We can charge, whenever there's a low demand on the building. We can extend. When you're working not against the building needs, but just to fill up your battery, if you will, then you have a lot of flexibility that you can use to optimize the charging efficiency and the hours, and you don't create any incremental non-coincident charges or facility charges. So it just gives you more flexibility, which also can be turned to efficiency because you can sometimes create that cold energy more efficiently than the existing chillers are because they have all that flexibility to choose the load on the chiller. And as a result, you can even be providing efficiency, not just shifting.
So we're out of time. So please thank our panelists. And that wraps up our panel.